This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When it comes to websites, online stores, etc., there's no place to build a beautiful online presence like Squarespace. David Lynch, one of the greatest filmmakers to ever do it. I've talked about Lynch and his work a little bit on this channel, but I don't think I've ever gotten the chance to really touch on all his work and why I love it so much. And with a new project of his possibly not coming to Cannes, I guess, what better time than now to talk about his movies? You know, I say this with every director rank video, but this time I really want to hammer home the point that David Lynch movies are very personal. He is one of the few filmmakers who know how to express any emotion so effortlessly and so viscerally through his work, and for that reason there really is no definitive best in his work. Some days I'm feeling angsty and Blue Velvet's my favorite, other days I'm feeling horny and Wild at Heart is my favorite. It's a running joke that his films don't make any goddamn sense. And to that I just want to say that I think having a filmmaker approach his work with expression taking priority over spoon-feeding information to audiences is something I really admire and appreciate. This is less of me going, this one is better than this one, and more my way of going through all his films and saying, hey, aren't they all pretty great? I do just want to say that Inland Empire is not on this list. I had the intent of seeing it this week and adding it in after writing the entire video, and then I got COVID and I couldn't go see the movie, and now I've written the whole video and it's too late to go back on it and start a brand new video this week, and I would watch it at home, but you can't find this movie anywhere online that I know of. It all turned into a big mess. I'm gonna see the movie eventually, and when I do, I'll update this list in the comments, on Letterboxd, in a what I watched this month video, whatever. It just became a huge mess with timing and this virus, and well, I hope you guys understand. So anyways, let's hop right into it. I guess they aren't all great. I wouldn't call this an unpopular take. David Lynch's Dune was a flop both critically and financially, which I'm gonna say is pretty inspiring considering all the great things he went on to do after it. It truly isn't the worst thing in the world. I do like this movie, believe it or not. I also think, on paper, David Lynch directing a movie whose themes are all about dreams and visions and fear seems kind of extremely good. But unfortunately, the size of something like Dune just wasn't something Lynch was able to pull off with this movie. The pacing feels like it isn't working, the information required to even understand Dune at a surface level isn't dealt out in the most interesting way. Not to say we need to be spoon-fed, I just think with a really dense sci-fi story like Dune, you're gonna need to explain some of it for the themes to reach their full potential, and I just don't know if this is the cleanest way of getting that stuff across. I do admire the goofiness of it, like it doesn't look great, but as I've mentioned in the past, I think the Baron is pretty amazing, and the colorful, gross look of it all is a great route to take the story. Eraserhead was my first David Lynch film, and it was also his, and that much is clear. The story of how Eraserhead was made, the iconic poster, that one video of people walking out of it for the first time, all of that is, I'm gonna say it, more interesting than Eraserhead.
Some inane, bizarre person with a disturbed mind wrote that film, and I did not enjoy it.
I'm obsessed with the mystery surrounding this film. It's so fun to figure out what exactly this movie is about, but it's also such a great kickoff to David Lynch's career, because if you thought this was weird, well, you're right. Eraserhead does have some of his most iconic imagery, like this thing, this girl, his hair. Sound-wise, it's also probably his eeriest. Usually his films have some moments that ground you in reality, even if those moments are also pretty weird. But Eraserhead feels like it is in a separate universe from start to finish. I only place it this low on this list because, well, it only gets better and darker from here. And because I do prefer Lynch's movies when they come back down to earth every now and then, it makes the darkness more effective. If everything is dark, nothing is. But all that said, Eraserhead 100% deserves its title as a must-see for all freshman year film students, because, I mean, just look at it. The Elephant Man is a lot. It seems like everyone has seen this movie, but nobody really talks about it, and I do not know why. The Elephant Man is one of David Lynch's sweetest films. I mean, it was produced by big-willed himself, Mel Brooks. How dark could it really get? But there is, like, a small part of this movie that is very disturbing. If you know, you know. I guess the thing about The Elephant Man is that it's a good movie. That's the thing. But it also doesn't seem to surprise you or shake you to your core in the way Lynch is known to do. Like, yes, this man's story is tragic. You feel for him immediately, and if anything, this film proves that Lynch is one of the most empathetic filmmakers to ever do it, and he is not just the weird guy. I think it's so beautiful that they capture the Elephant Man not in this creature feature type way, but more as like a person, you know? But I also think most of what you think is going to happen in this movie ends up happening, and when that's done through a David Lynch lens, I really can't complain too hard, especially when it sticks the landing in such a beautifully profound way. The black and white cinematography is just gorgeous, the production design is really stunning, Anthony Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt both deliver some really, really great performances. I think of all the films on this list, this is the one your mom is gonna like the most. Now, Twin Peaks itself is a show, not a movie. Did you know that? But because the pilot was originally made as a whole 90-minute thing, I'm counting it as a film. Because, well, it's not only probably the most important part of his career, but it's also just simply that good. I don't really know what to say here. I mean, we all know it's a great pilot. The world clearly seemed to really connect with it. It completely changed this thing we call TV. The atmosphere it creates right off the bat is immediately mesmerizing. The writing is really funny here and there. Agent Dale Cooper's introduction should be put in the Louvre. But what really gets me, especially on a rewatch, is the world's reaction to, spoiler alert, Laura Palmer's death. It is horrifying. I think the first time I watched it, it didn't really click with me. I was just like, oh yeah, she died. Now let's see what happens. But on a second watch, after kind of knowing what happens in the show, oh my goodness. There's the feeling that you lost a loved one, sure, but there's also the feeling that your view of the world as a young person has been irreversibly altered for the worst. Laura Palmer's murder hits the people of this town in such a profoundly dark way that really highlights everything great about what David Lynch is doing. The fear of not knowing why things are wrong, but knowing they are wrong. It's one of the greatest episodes of any show ever. It is really cool that it still holds up. My read on this movie, from what I remember, is that it is very much about paranoia and fear, which makes it pretty terrifying. It really matches its black and yellow color palette in that it feels like lightning and how sharp yet angry it all feels. The whole thing is extremely industrial, both in its music and presentation, but that's not to say it doesn't have a sense of humanism to it. I mean, it gives me chills just thinking about it. It places these real human emotions like isolation, nostalgia, and lust into extremely limiting spaces like prison or the desert or, well, a highway. The freedom that accompanies the characters in so much of this film is more frightening than it is liberating because of the guilt lurking beneath all of it. I wouldn't be able to make sense of this movie even if you had a gun to my head, but the violent male rage presented in this is never not felt, and the isolation and paranoia that accompanies it just makes it the most terrifyingly claustrophobic thing I've ever seen. I think if I had seen this before I watched Mulholland Drive, Lynch's other film about the horrors of LA, this may be my favorite thing in the world, but for now, I'm just gonna call it a really great movie that you should watch before Mulholland Drive. A few years ago, I saw the trailer for Wild at Heart at the New Beverly, and I was extremely upset because A, it was one of the craziest trailers for a movie I had ever seen, and I wanted to see that movie immediately, and B, I was leaving LA before the screening and wasn't going to get to see it. And this is a movie I wanted to see in a theater. I knew I could buy the Blu-ray and watch it at home or something, but something about it was begging me to watch it in a packed theater. And the wait was worth it because I finally got to see this in 35mm, and oh brother, I loved it. Wild at Heart may just be Lynch's funniest film. Every time Nick Cage opens his mouth, it's amazing. Laura Dern is so over the top in the best way. Willem Dafoe plays one of the best creepy guys I've ever seen. There's a John Lurie cameo in here. It's one of those movies that's fun until it isn't. Because sure, while it's a very wild road trip movie with sex and violence and vomit, it's also a David Lynch movie that will cut to really disturbing scenes when you least expect it. And while it may not be as controlled as some of his other films, I do really admire this for just how absurd and extreme it is. It is crazy to me that this won the Palm. Yeah, you heard me. The Straight Story made it way higher on this list than I ever expected. No, The Straight Story isn't even slightly dark. It can be sad and incredibly moving, but if this movie were a person, that person would probably have a heart attack if they watched Lost Highway. It's a Disney film directed by David Lynch, and it rules. It's like if nothing bad happened in Twin Peaks, or at least they didn't show the bad stuff, and it took place in the Midwest, and I love that. I think as someone who grew up in the Midwest, on a farm in Minnesota specifically, this film is on Fargo-level accuracy with how it depicts these small towns. And also in just how beautiful it depicts some of the Midwest. Like, yeah, it's sort of boring driving through all these cornfields, but it can look pretty. The dialogue between every person over the age of 60 in this movie is hilarious and comforting. The love and determination of this old dude is just so adorable and real. Like, I felt his care for his brother every step of the way. Alvin is full of regret, and you believe it because of his age and how much he talks about how the worst part about being old is thinking about your past. And I think showing this man drive this far with just the small rundown tractor is so moving, literally, because the idea of him not going to visit his brother is so much much more regretful than just plain going for it. It's his way of making things right and overcoming a dark history. And while it may not be the most haunting Lynch film out there for its material, I cannot think of a more perfect approach to this story. I kind of have a soft spot for Blue Velvet because it was sort of the first Lynch film that actually clicked with me, and I think that's because it does really simplify some of the major themes of his work to make it as accessible as possible without losing its edge, of course. It makes it clear as a blue sky day that this is a movie about American suburbia and the darkness that lies beneath it, which to some people may sound a little basic and like nothing we haven't seen before, but to me, seeing a very straightforward yet weird version of this story was just encapsulating as hell. It has my two favorite Lynch actors, Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern, and they're both perfect for their roles. Dennis Hopper as Frank Booth is honestly up there with Agent Cooper as one of my favorite Lynch characters. I don't think this is Lynch at his weirdest or his funniest or his darkest, but I owe it so much for just being my gateway into enjoying both his movies and those similar to it. It blends darkness with innocence so seamlessly and has to be a little surface level with its dialogue to get there, but man, do you get something truly original and kind of sexy. I'm still trying to figure out if this belongs in this list. I know there's all this debate on whether or not it's a film or a show or I'm putting it in. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it though, as to not spoil it, and I also just like what I said about it more in my Twin Peaks video, but this is the most recent thing Lynch has done, and it is a beast. Episode 8 alone, if you know, you know, is deserving of the top spot. You might see why I'm still on the fence if it counts, because is it even fair? This thing is so massive and is honestly a culmination of everything Lynch has ever been good at summed up in one project. Like, it's hilarious, it's visually stunning, it's confusing, it's nightmarish, it's riveting, it's sexy. I've been using the word sexy a lot more than I expected in this video. And this placement in the list just felt right because these next two are straight up all-timers in my opinion. But I think I'll leave it for there on this one. I think this is a much better thing to watch than it is to talk about, so just go check it out. I will come right out and say it. This is his darkest movie, hands down. And considering I've wanted to say that about most of the movies I've talked about on here, including the #1 spot, that's saying a lot. I'm gonna do my best to not spoil this for those who haven't seen it, but the themes Fire Walk With Me deals with are not new to Lynch, but he made this movie as though he had nothing to lose. Like, he knew he needed to go as dark as possible, and he did. Laura Palmer is his best character, and like I mentioned with Elephant Man, Lynch is phenomenal at creating empathy for these characters. And that ability, plus his ability to depict trauma so vividly, makes Fire Walk With Me one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. Not one bit of this feels right. Even the moments where something nice is happening feel off. For the main theme surrounding this film, which I'm not gonna say because spoilers, that's a very effective way of going about it. Don't get me wrong, all of Twin Peaks, besides that string of episodes in season 2, is essential, but Fire Walk With Me feels not only like the thesis statement that ties so much of this show together, but it also honestly feels like the thesis statement to his entire body of work. The unexplainable is horrifying even when you know. Lynch's vision of the evil in the world has never been darker than it is in this movie. It's hard to say I'll ever fully understand Twin Peaks as a whole, but Fire Walk With Me is nothing short of unforgettable, depicting horrifyingly real feelings in a way that I don't think will ever leave my mind. I'm just kidding. There is no best on this list, but god damn it does Mulholland Drive come close. I've probably said the word dark and apparently sexy like 30 times in this video, but I really haven't talked enough about dreams and nightmares, which to me is one of Lynch's most important themes in his work. Nobody talks about how cool dreams are quite like this man, and Mulholland Drive is the movie that makes use of this theme the best. Dreams are, after all, fragments of reality, but in some abstract form. They're indescribable, but they come from a sort of truth. And Lynch uses dreams and nightmares in this film to tell the story of LA's dark underworld and the harsh realities of our entire world. Like, I know I said Fire Walk With Me is the thesis statement for everything he's done, but this is like the David Lynch movie, you know? What I really love about Mulholland Drive, though, is that I didn't get it the first time I watched it, like, at all, but I still really, really liked it. It's not a movie where you need to necessarily get it, you can just feel it. Something about it connected with me, even if that thing wasn't clear. And I think that's the sign of good art. I initially described it as a good puzzle, but I hate to break it to you, young Karsten, but movies just aren't puzzles that need to be solved. And not to sound pretentious, but Mulholland Drive isn't something that should be solved, it should be felt. You might not get it, but you can feel the fear in the movie. A nightmare doesn't make sense, but it can still horrify you. It's not like you try and solve a nightmare, you just feel the fear. All that said, this did click with me on so many levels the second time I watched it, and I can now confirm it's a 5-star movie and is maybe one of the best things anyone's ever made. It feels like the kind of thing Lynch has been trying to make with every film, trying to depict a dream and that higher level of abstraction that comes so naturally to us, but that we can't actually describe. He did it without losing focus on the humanity of the film. He did the impossible. He made something nobody will ever be able to make again. And that's why it's my favorite of his. And hey, that's the rank. Not to sound like every film student ever, but I love this man so much. If you haven't already, I strongly urge you to watch his entire filmography. I promise it's worth it. And then drop your ranks in the comments. I want to see them. Thanks for watching. Go watch a David Lynch movie and form your own opinion. And before you head out, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Now, Squarespace, if you didn't already know, is a place where you can go online to build your brand, whether that be an online store, a blog, a portfolio, you name it. They have professional portfolio designs where you can create galleries for your work, as well as password protected pages for clients. As someone who's making a lot of videos these days, I love their video block feature, which allows me to showcase some of my favorite videos, some of my films, in a way that looks really nice. Not to mention they have a built-in mobile web designer, which makes it so that any website you make, it'll automatically look great no matter what platform you're on, while still matching your style. But the best part about it all is that if you go to squarespace.com/Karsten, you can get 10% off of your first purchase. Lads, there's no reason at this point not to give it a shot. So thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Thanks for watching this video. And you know what? I'll see you in the next one.